All right, welcome back today. If you weren't around yesterday, what we were dumping into was called Toxic Tuesday. And Toxic Tuesday was actually walking down some of the journey of the affairs and of the cheating and some of the things that had happened in my life. And I wanted to be very clear that I didn't get a chance to be able to finish some of that video yesterday because of how long it was going. So I wanted to be able to bring it to you in part 2 that we're going to talk about today inside the area of affairs and cheating. So if you haven't listened to the first part, then this might not make sense jumping right in, but we're going to jump right in with where we were yesterday to be able to talk through this piece of Toxic Tuesdays, which was yesterday, and also this piece of cheating. So cheating was a piece that was the norm for me. It was the part that I kept going back to, thinking, well, like, I'll just break the cycle and I won't do this anymore. But the problem was I just kept going back, kept doing it over and over and over again. Then there was this story in my mind that was always painting me as the victim that I wanted to believe that I was the person that was being hurt. I was the person that was always left. I was the person that was not understood. All of these stories that I would create in my mind to make myself feel better about what I was doing. And so the first 2 affairs happened. Then we get to the third affair. The third affair was one of these pieces that just seemed to just happen, right? Like it just happened. And so in this aspect, got to a place where I was actually traveling and I was going different places, helping open up different stores. And I went to one of these stores and there was this moment of interaction with this one girl and another guy where we went out to eat, and where the conversation just went really like open sexually, of like just talking through a bunch of different things. And there was just this chemistry there of like, oh, like I can talk about these kind of things and we can get really like nasty with it, and it feels good, right? It feels like cool. It feels exciting because this is not the norm. This is not how I normally talk. This is not how I normally act. And all of this kept like lining up. So there's a bunch of pieces that just had doors open. Then started texting, started interacting, and ended up being like a couple nights with this person while I was at this event. And so this all happened when when I get home, my wife ends up telling me that we're pregnant. And so there's a ton of guilt and shame and things that came out right then and there. A ton of it. Like, it was weird. I kind of like disconnected. When I got home and she told me that, it was just kind of like I completely like disconnected. Like, I didn't really give her much of a response. I think she thought it was weird because I didn't really give much of a response about the kids, about the fact that she was pregnant. And so it was just kind of like weird. That child was the one that ended up going on that we lost, the miscarriage. Now, inside of that whole losing and miscarriage, my mind wanted to spin up its own stories about me, telling myself that it was my fault that that happened because I cheated. It was my fault that that happened because of what I did. It was my fault because of the lies, because of all of these different things. And it just added more layers and layers of shame that I was putting on myself. And so when we moved and we lost the baby, and then we moved and we came to another location, then I'm like, okay, there's not anymore. I've been able to move past that. Like, we're good. And then it started up again. Then it started up again where I started interacting with other women and I started interacting with other people at work, and there just became this connection. All of this always started off with a connection point with another person. Developing this like connection with, hey, this is how we act, how we interact, we like the same things, we do the same things, whatever it might be. There's this like connection and then like flirtatious piece. Then it got to a place where then it just keep going and going and going, and then it would get closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden it'd be something that went from, hey, just being interactions, being acquaintances, being friends, to being lovers. And so this happened a 4th time. And in going through this piece, it was different. It was different in what I was engaging with. It was more subtle. It was longer going. It was longer going throughout like the workplace. It was longer going throughout like our friend group. Like, it was just all over the place. It was just a piece that continued to go long term. And then people started noticing. Like, people in the workplace started noticing, like, hey, he's spending time with this person. Hey, why are they talking in the parking lot? Hey, this, hey, that. And everybody would talk. And inside of that, there would be people that would actually come to my defense. Well, no, he's like working with her on this, or he's dealing with this, or he's trying to encourage her in this, whatever it might be. There's people that come to my defense. Even at the place where my wife would accuse me at home of, I think you're cheating with her, or I think you're having an inappropriate relationship with her. And then at work, she would defend me. Be like, no, he's just, he had to talk to her about something. And so it became this thing. And this is what happens inside of even narcissistic abuse. It becomes this thing that you start to protect the other person. Even if you have doubts, fears, even if you have proof that something's happening, you start to protect the other person. And oftentimes it's to protect the other person so it also protects you from the embarrassment of like, why are you still with a person that keeps cheating on you? And so that's part of what she was doing. Part of it is the trauma bond, part of it is embarrassment. Like she had to protect herself. And that's how she would do it, of defending me. No, that's not what. And then she would talk to me later, being like, this person said something. Like, can you stop? Like, why do you keep interacting with this person? Why do you keep talking to this person? Like, stop. It's not helping. Throughout this time, we had our second kid, our firstborn now. And so inside of this, she's born, and there's still these interactions with this other girl being in our lives. And Kayla not knowing anything about it, not to the degree of like, yes, she is cheating. She had this gut feeling the entire time. Like she knew internally that the entire time, but the actual knowingness of the proof, that wasn't there. The proof of me confessing, that wasn't there. She would catch different things, then it would delete, it would disappear. Like there would be multiple pieces that she knew, but she didn't have the proof. So then she was just kind of like, well, I'll stay a little bit longer. Then this relationship started to go downhill. In the aspect that she wanted more. And she wanted me to leave my wife and my daughter. And at that point, there's this weird conundrum because in my mind, I'm like, I want to go and be with you because that's what this whole affair started as. Because I wasn't happy at home. But in the other sense, I didn't want to break up my family because my family had this image, right? It looked good to other people. I didn't want to appear bad to my parents. And from the Christian frame of like, oh, you're that person getting a divorce. I didn't want to hurt my daughter that way. All of these thoughts that don't even make sense because like, if I didn't want that, then why am I doing the thing that's actually hurting them? But in the moment, I'm not thinking about that aspect. I'm only thinking about me. Well, that's going to put me in a weird situation. That's going to put me uncomfortable. And looking back, I literally think there was a piece of it that was a limiter placed on me by God. Of just this kind of piece of like, yeah, let's not. Like a piece that just didn't let me go to another level because he knew if I went to another level, that everything else in my life would completely implode. It did, but not in this exact way. And I remember getting to a place where this other gal in my life was so passionate about me leaving. And there was one moment that we were sitting across the table at work, and then she was like whispering and talking and like getting really like adamant of like, leave your wife. Do you know you don't love her? You know you love me. And there's all different types of pieces that started going into this that just started being like putting me off. And part of it was like the aggression. Part of it was like the intensity. Part of it is like, hey, she was saying one thing, like we were both doing the same thing. Like she was dating around and then being with me. I was with my wife and then being with her. She had no obligation to, be with me. But in the same aspect, we were like, oh, we love each other, but we're still with other people. So it's a really messed up situation. Then in learning and getting through some of this and getting to a place where understanding it and understanding even people around the situation, looking in on that, a lot of people started to see and realize that that person wasn't just a person that was, hey, normal person that was cheating, but also had a lot of borderline tendencies of how she would act, how she would interact, how she would actually manipulate, how she would, all these different things. And part of it became clear to me because I started to see how she was acting and I started to realize that that's how I acted. There wasn't this piece of an awareness of like, oh, I'm a narcissist now. It was just this piece of like, wait a second, like I do that. Like she just hurt me in that way, but I do the same thing because I'm lying this way. So it's just kind of like an awareness piece. But that relationship started to come to a head and started to implode. Started to implode because she wanted more and I wasn't willing to give her more. And then got into the fifth relationship and it kind of crisscrossed. There's tons of blowups. There's tons of things that were happening during this time. And then the fifth relationship went for a period of time, but it went like backwards. It went from a period of like we were interacting together and then we were like physical. And then we got to a place where it's more like, okay, we shouldn't be physical. It's not right. It's not what we want to do. It's not honoring to God, right? So we went from physical to being kind of like emotional affair. And then from emotional affair, we went to being friends. And then from friends, went to a place of being like, hey, we just need to go no contact. Super difficult and super hard. And this was like the longest journey out of all of this. If both of these hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here today. One, because the one started to build a different piece of awareness and started to have a different level of hurt on me. Hurt that I needed to feel in order to actually see the hurt that I was giving to other people. And the other one to actually be able to wake me up to the reality of what was actually going on and actually have it go backwards. Super weird. It's super odd. I don't really talk about it much because it doesn't really make sense. People are like, how does it go backwards as far as like the physical, the emotional, like friendship, acquaintance, and then like no contact? And that's just how God planned it. During this time, my mindset was, well, I've messed everything up, but maybe we can all still be friends. And I was still orchestrating and keeping it all together for a good period of time. Like the fourth affair was in our lives for about 10 months after everything was confessed. Everything was confessed, everything new. And Kayla was so trauma bonded that she was still hosting and having that person in the friend group inside of our house. Like she looks back on it. Like she's told me, she's looked back on it. She's like, how crazy was I to even allow this to happen? To even like let her back into the house after I knew. Because the other girl didn't even apologize. Like she didn't care. There's a moment of like her just being like pissed off that she like told Kayla, I knew what I was doing and I would do it again. But everything was so trauma bonded that it was difficult for Kayla to be able to see this. And it was difficult for me to let go of different pieces. So it took 10 months before I actually even blocked that person, before she was out of my life. And then the last one that was there, the fifth relationship, that continued to go. And it continued to go until we got to a place where it was just like friends. There was still interaction. There was no sexualness. There was no emotional piece, but it was still interaction. There's still too much because of everything that had happened. There was still too many ties there, but it was that type of interaction. And through all of this, Kayla got to the place where she's like, okay, I'm done. Like she didn't want to leave because she was afraid if I leave, he's going to cheat on me. Even though in her mind, she was like, well, he's been cheating on me this entire time, so why does it even matter? But there was the finality of it. So when she left, it was the finality of like, she's moving, she's going to take a job in another state, she's going to be gone, and she's done. And if she had that in her mind, she's like, I'm done. Then in doing that, what it did is it released me from doing any work for her. Because she wasn't around anymore. She was done. She was out. We were pretty much almost completely no contact. We had a couple interactions, and we traded our daughter one weekend in like a period of like 4 months or so. But she was done. And inside of that, I was left alone to be able to figure out, okay, am I going to continue having this connection with this other person, or am I eventually going to get to a place where I'm done? And that took a long period of time to be able to work through to actually release and let go. Because I didn't want to. I had a fantasy. I had this idea in my head that this is who I wanted to be with. This is what life should be like. This is what life should feel like. Because I was just going off of feelings, what I wanted in the moment. And so finally getting to the place where we go from the physical, the emotional, the friendship, the acquaintance, and go no contact. And go to a place where like we've never talked since. That piece of breaking that down from a positive light in my toxic mind, because that person was like the best person ever. That was the thought process, the idea. Breaking it down to be able to say, okay, I'm going to release and let go and actually make a conscious choice to invest in my wife. One of those hardest decisions and processes I had to go through. And I had to get to the place of thinking and saying and realizing that I haven't invested anything into my relationship. I hadn't invested anything into my wife. And if I wasn't willing to actually invest in that, then nothing was going to change. Nothing was actually going to happen. And so I had to do that. That was the next step. So I started investing into my wife, and whenever she came back to be able to get clothes, it's really all she came back for. She didn't come back to stay. She came back to get clothes, stayed for a week, and was like, I'll give it another week. And then she gave it another week, and then a month, and then another month. And she really kind of just played this game in her mind of like, okay, here's my next out. To wait and see if the things that she was seeing inside of me, the changes, how I was showing up, how I was communicating, were actually different or not. All right. That's where we are now. There's a whole lot of life since then, but that at least catches you up to speed when we're talking about Toxic Tuesdays, even though it's Wednesday, and we're talking about cheating. Just part of my story. You might be like, why are you telling us all of this? Like, is this just like you flaunting, hey, this is what you've done? No. This is me saying, hey, here is all of my shit laid out in front of you. To say, one, I understand where you are, what's going on. I understand the things that you've been put through because I've done that. And also have you understand that this is what I actually provide inside of Raw Motivations is we help women find closure inside the toxic relationships so that they don't repeat this cycle or stay in it so long like my wife did. but being able to actually empower you to reclaim and rediscover your voice, who you actually are, to see the facts for what they are before you actually have to look for such a long period of time as a sleuth trying to figure out what is the actual evidence. You already know the evidence. You already know the evidence internally. You already know the evidence if you look at the relationship and how he's showing up on a day-to-day basis. But the question is, are you willing to do something about it? If you're willing to do something about it for you and for your growth and for your development, then reach out. Go to rawmotivations.com today. We'd love to help you move forward inside the healing process today. You have a blessed, wonderful day, and we'll see y'all next time.